Imagine a small, quiet town in Wisconsin. Plainfield is the kind of place where everyone knows each other's name, where the biggest news is a sale at the local store or a rumor after Sunday service. And among all those familiar faces is one man nobody really notices, Ed Gein. Quiet, awkward, a little strange, but polite. He helps with small jobs, does odd work for neighbors, smiles at children, and almost always keeps his eyes down. People describe him as odd, but harmless. Now moved to a November morning in 1957. The son of the local hardware store owner, Bernice Worden, cannot reach his mother. That is strange because she is always there, always running the place. He arrives at the store and finds the front door open. Inside, there is silence. On the floor are blood trails leading toward the back. The cash register is open. Bernice is gone. On the counter lies the last receipt, a simple sale for a gallon of antifreeze. The name on the receipt is familiar, Ed Gein. That one small detail, a piece of paper anyone else would have thrown away and forgotten, becomes the key that opens one of the darkest cases in American criminal history. Police follow that lead to Gein's farm, an old house sitting alone on the edge of town, with a neglected yard and dark windows that almost never seem to show light. From the outside, it looks like the abandoned property of a lonely man. Inside, at first, it is only dirt, dust, trash, and the smell of decay. It is unpleasant, but not yet unthinkable. The real nightmare begins when officers open the door to the barn. In the dim light, they see Bernice Worden's body hanging upside down, butchered and displayed like an animal in a slaughterhouse. A human being reduced to meat in a cold, dark barn. That moment becomes the point where the town of Plainfield loses any sense of normal life. But that is only the first door. The real horror is inside the house. As the search begins, the officers slowly understand that they are not simply inside a killer's home. They are inside a workshop of death, a place where the human body has been turned into raw material. In one room, they find bowls made from human skulls. On the walls hang masks made from the skin of women's faces, carefully removed and dried. Chairs are covered in human skin. In a corner stands a chair completely reupholstered with it. On the shelves are boxes holding noses, fingers, nails, and other body parts, arranged like a nightmare collection of spare pieces. They find a corset made from a woman's torso, cut from the body in one piece. They find leggings made from skin taken from human legs. They find a belt made of women's nipples and pieces of clothing that can only be described as a suit made from human skin. Some remains are painted and tied with ribbons, as if they were twisted trophies rather than evidence of murder. In one box, they find the head of Mary Hogan, the tavern owner who disappeared in 1954 and had been missing for years. In another container, they find Bernice Worden's heart. In the refrigerator, there are organs. And in the house, there are objects and fragments that suggest a private, sick logic, a way of sorting bodies, pieces, and memories into some kind of inner system only Gein understood. At first, all of this looks like pure madness, but the deeper investigators go, the clearer it becomes that this nightmare has its own cold and twisted logic. There is a pattern, there is order, there is intention. While forensic teams document the house, Gein is taken into custody and slowly begins to talk. He confesses to 2 murders, Mary Hogan and Bernice Worden. But it quickly becomes obvious that those 2 crimes do not explain everything found in the house. Then he starts describing what he did at night, what he did in graveyards. Gein admits that after the death of his mother, to whom he had a deeply unhealthy attachment, he felt drawn to cemeteries. He read local obituaries and searched for the names of women who had recently died, women who reminded him of his mother in age, appearance, or type. Then he waited for the burials. He waited for darkness. He took tools and went out to the cemetery like a hunter on a carefully planned mission. He chose fresh graves. He opened the earth, removed the coffin lid, and sometimes took the body whole. More often, he took only the parts he wanted: skin, heads, organs. The rest he returned to the coffin and covered again, leaving the grave looking untouched by morning. That detail is important because it shows how carefully he worked. He was not simply acting on impulse. He was trying to hide everything, to make sure the families of the dead would never know their loved ones had been disturbed. Over the years, his house filled with skulls, severed heads, bones, and pieces of skin. Some skulls were used as bowls. Skin became lampshades, chairs, corsets, and masks. Organs were stored in the refrigerator. In some accounts, bones were boiled and used in horrifying private rituals. This was not just murder. It was a private universe built around a single, damaged center: his obsession with his mother and his warped view of women. At the same time, he continued living in town as the weird Ed, helping with simple errands, sometimes watching neighbors' children, seeming awkward but harmless. People joked about him, but nobody feared him. No one connected the disappearances of women to the quiet farmer walking through town with his head down. His isolated farm gave him privacy, and his reputation as an odd but harmless man gave him cover. That is another part of what makes this case so terrifying. He did not try to look dangerous. He worked to remain invisible. Inside the house, the land of chaos and decay had one exception: one door, boarded up. Behind it was a completely different world. When police finally reached that room, they found a perfectly preserved bedroom. A clean bed, neat furniture, belongings left in place. It was the room of his mother. Everything she had touched was preserved, as if she might return at any moment. The rest of the house was a rotting nest of filth, death, and horror. But this room was untouched, like a shrine. That contrast is the key to understanding him. The entire house was his mind. In the center was the frozen, idealized image of his mother. Around it was a world of filth, bodies, skin, objects, and rituals. His grave robbing, his murders, his grotesque creations were all part of one twisted attempt to bring his mother back, to control the female body, and to build a physical form out of the dead. Gein would later describe wanting to wear the body of a woman, to literally step into another identity. That is how the skin suit makes sense in his distorted logic. The masks, the corset, the leggings, the trophies, the body parts, all of it was part of his effort to become something else while still remaining trapped inside the same obsession. Psychiatrists and criminologists later pointed to severe childhood trauma, religious fear, isolation, and his mother's influence as major factors. But for the listener, the most important thing is this: his actions were not random. They were the result of a repeated pattern, a private ritual, and a horrifying internal system. Every small detail makes the story more disturbing. He chose victims and bodies that resembled his mother. He used obituaries like a catalog. He planned his nighttime cemetery trips. He arranged the stolen remains into categories: furniture, clothing, masks, trophies. He divided his home into zones: one area for decay and death, and one untouched sacred space reserved for his mother. None of that excuses him. It makes the story worse because it shows will, intent, and a logic that was completely his own. Officially, Gein was found mentally unfit and sent to a psychiatric institution for the rest of his life. He was convicted of the 2 murders that could be proven, but the larger story, the grave robbing, the body parts, the objects, the hidden room, continued to haunt the public imagination. Even now, people still ask how many names were never counted, how many disturbed graves were never linked to a formal murder charge, and how much of what he did remained buried in the dark. His house was eventually torn down. Many of the crime scene photographs were kept from the public for years because they were too disturbing to show in full. But the structure of that house, the skin-covered furniture, the masks on the walls, the locked room of his mother, the body in the barn, became a blueprint for horror for decades to come. Psycho, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Silence of the Lambs, and countless other films and series all return, directly or indirectly, to Plainfield, Wisconsin, and to the man who read obituaries by day, smiled at neighbors, and at night wore the skin of the dead in an attempt to resurrect the woman who ruled his life. And maybe the most terrifying part is not the number of objects or the brutality of the evidence. It is how long all of this existed beside ordinary people who thought he was only a shy, strange farmer. One receipt for antifreeze, one missing woman, one open store door. That was the crack in the wall that let the truth escape from behind the boarded-up room of an old farmhouse. And every time you see a movie about a killer's house filled with skin lamps and human masks, remember this: Police once opened a real door in Plainfield and discovered that some nightmares do not end when you wake up.